Hello, so my name's Paul. I work at a company called Captain Train. It's a French company. We sell train tickets. We active in France, Germany, and Italy right now, and we're trying to expand to the rest of Europe. I started with this company almost 4 years ago, and we actually started our application with Ember.js. At this time, it was called a Sprout Core 2. I mean, it was still Sprout Core. It was evolving, forking, let's say, into Ember framework. So I know some of you using Ember. Some of you probably don't and maybe never seen it or have no idea what it's about. So I'm going to try to present it before I go into the rest of the presentation. Just for a little background, I was working on JavaScript application for almost 7 years now. So almost 4 years with Ember applications. So before this, I saw different other approaches. And actually 7 years ago, there wasn't much. I mean, there were like huge frameworks, like things that we almost forgot right now, or which were deprecated, like YUI, the Yahoo framework, or XJS, which also still kind of, it still exists, but I don't even know if like people are even starting new projects with it. But aside of it, the rest, it was basically jQuery and Backbone emerged at some point and some other framework. And then the trend during those years was to like having some JavaScript frameworks emerged from there. Now we have a few of them which pretty active, and lots of you, I think, at least used or tried or at least heard that maybe a good idea to use a JavaScript framework for some type of applications. So what's Ember? So if you go to the main page, like a home page of Ember, this is what it says. It's a framework for creating ambitious web applications. And what it actually means, ambitious. I would say that it's mostly a matter of definitely it's a matter of size of not only of your code but also of your team. For me, it's pretty important, and I think Ember is a lot about people and not only about technology. It's about how you, because one of the lots of very valid approaches to the question of how we build a web JavaScript application. You can have a lot of valid technical answers, but this is only part of the problem. The other part is how you actually give it, how it's usable by a team, how it's gonna play in the long run. Things that Jose were talking this morning about, like the long-term maintainability and evolution of our application. And I think this is what Ember is mostly about. So another just quick disclaimer, Ember 2.0 is going to be released in a few weeks. So this talk I'm going to assume that most stuff I'm going to talk to you about, it's I'm not going to really care about what happened before Ember 2.0. You just need to know that Ember 1.0 was released almost 2 years ago, and there was no huge breaking changes since then. Interesting thing that actually Ember 2.0 is not going to break your application either. This is the very, very huge point, and something important to talk about when we talk about Ember is I talked that a framework should be about people, and people actually, I mean, as developers, we kind of like new things, but we don't really like when things break and then someone just removes some API or they change and you have to rewrite your app or fix it in a lot of places and you don't know what's happening. And it's a hard choice because, as I said, we want to have new things. We all like new shiny toys, and sometimes we already exposed a lot of time to the new frameworks, new technologies, new ideas, and it's a temptation to just drop everything away and try to rewrite with a new shiny framework. So yeah, I've been doing this for a while, and I saw people, companies, at the time, it was years ago, starting with maybe nothing or maybe Backbone, and then a few years later, then Angular become very popular, rewriting in Angular and running around saying, oh, how it's everything is awesome. And then a few years later, basically maybe 2 years ago, then React started to be, especially this year, then React really came into the light. They threw everything away again, and they started again rewriting everything with React. So, it's okay if you have people, time, and money doing it. It's fine, and I probably, my experience is that our company, we've been with Ember for, as I said, almost 4 years, and we actually started very early, way before 1.0, because Ember's interesting thing is that Ember came from the Ember, the frame. Another important part about Ember, why it's about people, is that it's not built by a company. It's a really open source project in the sense that it's open community project, in the sense that core team today have members from at least, I would say, 5 or 6 different companies, maybe even more. And none of them is more, I mean, some of them are more dominant than others, but it's still very broad audience, and all those companies have very different, can have very different schedules. And they managed to all work together and build something which will accommodate everyone. And this is why from the beginning Ember was built in open, so which means that for the first almost 2 years, it was a work in progress framework. It wasn't stable before 1.0, and everything was breaking basically every 2 weeks or every month. And some people get very, very pissed about it. But even if the community and the core team tried to explain that it's what it takes to build something in the open. It's not like when Google is building Angular, basically they're doing code dumps. Actually, this is something that lots of big companies doing often. Basically, it's not like open source, it's open dump. And this is, I mean, it can be comfortable in the sense that you're getting like a finished product and you don't have to care about what's happening in between. But the problem may be the transition, because like what's happening with, maybe they're gonna flesh it out and find a solution. But right now, what seems to be happening, for example, with Angular 2 is basically they didn't announce any transition plan for now. Maybe they're gonna do it, and I hope so. But the idea of Ember was that once we get to the stable version, then they're going to keep the backward compatibility. And what's happened since then, as I said, for 2 years now, during all the lifetime of 1.0, some APIs were added, none were removed. And even in some versions, when there were problems with even there was an attempt, even when there was realized that some private APIs were used, maybe there was even attempt to maybe even make them backward compatible sometimes in order to help community. So this is about the whole story. So Ember 2.0, then it came out. The idea is that it should be still mostly backward compatible with what we have in 1.0, except for some things that were deprecated for a long time and which were extracted into plugins. So basically, even if you want to, you don't have time or resources to upgrade everything, you can just add a few plugins and have the same APIs you had before. So what's inside of Ember? First, very important things are URLs and the router. This is what was the main selling point from Ember from the beginning. And basically, it's about the fact that when you don't handle URLs properly, basically you're breaking the web. And this is what happened in lots of early days JavaScript frameworks. basically the routing API was something like router.match, and you're passing some kind of regex for something that match your URL, and then you have a callback, and that was it. And then you were changing URL. In the beginning, it was with hash bangs things, and then it became when we get push history API. But the idea was the same. Like basically, every time URL change, you have a callback, and you rendering something or doing something. This can seem like a very simple approach, and actually, in some sense, maybe functional and pure one, because basically you have like one function which gets like maybe parameters from the URL and you render something. The problem is it doesn't really scale in a huge application, because often what you actually what's matter is the transition. Is a transition between two pages, because when you go from one page to another, some things may happen, and if you diving into the complexity of building a JavaScript application, actually you may want to take advantage of it. It means that when you're going from one page to another, for example, you may have some animations, so it basically means that you need at some point have access to both states, the one before the transition begins and one after, or you may want to load some more data in between between the transition. So this transition needs to be asynchronous actually, and this adds a lot of complexity. And this is what Ember Router tried to solve from the beginning, and what it continues to solve. So this is a very important thing. Another thing is declarative UIs. I think by now most people are convinced that this is the good way of the right way of doing it. Frameworks like React, they really like put the spot on this whole idea of declarative UIs. We could argue then before Ember 2.0, there was too many moving parts in Ember actually. There were controllers, views, there was lots of things which actually basically which was inherited from Sprout core background, and I think it's all this was cleaned up with Ember 2.0, and like as I'm going to show later, they I think Ember community knew how to listen to the trend of and to the actually understanding by now that component approach like web components, but web components are still for now very shaky ground, so we I mean, we have a pretty good idea what we're going to get, but it's still changing a lot. So for now, every framework building its own abstraction, which is very good. And actually, next thing I want to show you, it's a quote from Yehuda Katz, one of the creators of Ember and Handlebar's template engine, which is used in Ember. So he said, the reason I built Handlebars in the first place wasn't an attempt to create a logicless template engine. I built Handlebars so they could start from zero and build up semantic structure which would support data bindings from the get-go. So yes, he wrote this, and he was actually asked why HTML had to be logicless, and is it like a real is it something that he really wants to defend, like the idea that we shouldn't put any logic in the templates in comparison to a lot of frameworks like Angular or other, who actually you can put a lot of, you can put some kind of expression very in almost free form. I mean, it's still like some kind of a subset language. It's not JavaScript, but still. And yeah, so this explains that it's not what it was about from the beginning. It's not about preventing you from having, and actually Ember had from the beginning if helper, it had like different other conditional helpers, unless you had like, so it wasn't about this, it was about building the right abstraction. And I'm going to talk about a little bit later about abstractions again. I'm just going to show you the evolution that came into the framework. So in the beginning we had Handlebars template engine, and then it evolved into HTML bars, and then it get replaced its rendering engine by Glimmer. I'm maybe going to talk later about like what's HTML and what Glimmer, but the important thing to understand is all the three changes were pretty, they were heavy changes. It was almost full rewrites of rendering engine and templating engine, but they didn't change the semantics or the grammar or syntax of the templating language, which means that every time we get an upgrade, nothing had to be changed in your templates. And it means that your application with an upgrade were just running faster with better helpers, with better semantics. Sometimes semantics were added, better ones. And but your application, you didn't have to rework your application. Maybe sometimes you have to adapt the small, very, very small parts. But the main part of it was still the same. And this is how, I don't know if you see. Oh, okay, seems fine. So this is an example of a template for a component, which tries to show like train tickets, for example. So as you can see, it is pretty declarative. You can understand pretty easily what's going on here. One argument about, like, we see a lot of like React, and we saw other examples during this conference of frameworks which try to replace HTML with basically functional calls. So I can see the kind of the reasoning behind it, and but in my experience, and actually, as you see, my talk is a lot about the fact that sometimes you need to be pragmatic and understand that, first of all, like if you work with some designers, they not really gonna like your functional calls. They not necessarily gonna understand them. And yeah, some people say me, yeah, I found some awesome developer who actually learned Clojure and he's fine writing templates in Clojure. Great for you. If you manage to find this designer, it's awesome. I know we're having a hard time finding good designers who can focus on the design part already. So if I need to find one who actually understands ClojureScript on top of it, it's going to be even harder. So sometimes you want to make your life easier. Another part of Ember, I'm going to try to speed up a little bit, is tooling. Tooling is something essential for a framework. And I'm going to tell you in the end why. Basically, when you're starting an Ember application, you running something like this. Ember new, my beautiful app. You go in there, you install add-ons. So Ember have add-ons, which is very awesome for the community because everybody can experiment with new things. And actually even core team sometimes before adding new things to Ember itself, to the core, experiment with them in the add-ons. So, and add-ons also can, as I told you earlier, they can help with transitions because you can extract when you're dropping some deprecated APIs. You don't have to just you're not removing them. Almost all APIs which were removed from Ember, they were actually extracted in the add-ons. Some of them which considered really not so useful. Yeah, they not so well maintained, but they still exist. They're there. It's not code that just disappears. It just go into an add-on. If someone depends on it, he can always use it or take over it. And they have generators also to build, like to generate routes, components, etc. You have test runner. You have build facility and deploy facility. So basically, you don't have lots of projects in JavaScript, and actually this is something people ask me often. I see they start with, oh, what's going to be the building pipeline? Are we using Grunt? Are we using Gulp? Are we using Broccoli? Are we using something even else? Are we using Webpack? Oh, and now I have to write the Webpack configuration. And oh, and 2 weeks later, I have something working, sometimes good, but still, two weeks into the process, I just write 5 lines and I have a full build tool with everything I need. A build tool will provide you with live reload, and actually it will show you errors, build errors. And nice thing that if I change my code and I fix the error, it will reload automatically and the error will just disappear. And as you can see here, the error, they're actually shown in the browser. So it's not like I have an error somewhere in my, I also have error in my terminal, but where the build tool is running. But I also have directly, I have direct insight in what's happening in my browser. We have Ember Inspector. This is like the killer feature of of Ember. You just have to play with it. It's something really amazing when you, if you like basically Chrome DevTools or Firefox DevTools, this is an extension to them, and it's give you so much insight into what's happening inside of your framework. We have a test runner with you can connect to different browsers to and to Phantom.js for on server on CIs. So what I want to say about it, the frameworks are about commoditization. It means that it's about not thinking about some part of some tooling, some concepts, some ideas which were proven, or at least time they seem to be proven and they seem good, and you don't want to spend time on those things. You want to spend time actually writing your code, your application. So I'm gonna make a kind of bold statement about the fact that Ember can be boring in the sense that you don't get to invent the wheel every day. You don't, you don't have to. We take from you some part of the decision. Decision which I know some people like it, and but actually, and again, there is a lot of talks about this, the whole cost of choice actually, and the cost of choice is reduced in Ember, and this is, I think it's a good thing for especially for large teams. It can be also a very good thing for small teams when it begins. It different advantages, but important thing is also to see who is actually using Ember, and even if you see at the usage, it's actually I think it's pretty impressive, and I actually having hard time finding the same kind of references for Angular, for example. Sorry about that. Yeah, and actually, a few days ago, we got this tweet, so it's official. Apple Music is actually built with Ember. So we again gone a full circle, because Ember started as a fork from Sprout Core, which came from Apple, and Sprout Core was used to build most of the iCloud applications. I think it's still used in there, and we made a full circle coming back to Apple, which now use Ember for its new major applications. Very, very quickly, just so you know, ECMAScript 6, it's something that's very, very much used in Ember. Ember embraced it from the beginning. It integrated Babel into Ember tooling from the very, very early days. Our application, we're using ECMAScript models for almost more than a year for sure, maybe and a half, so really amazing. Thank you for people who worked on them. It's really changed the way we're building application, and I think it's gonna change even more. I'm just going very, very quickly through different things that we got in ECMAScript 6. So promises, iterators, generators, I'm gonna talk about them later, fat arrow, splat operator, all those things, especially iterator, fat arrow, splat operator, this is something which actually enabled a lot of what I'm trying to get into functional paradigms in Ember. But before going in there, I want to talk about very quickly about functional relationship. When I was preparing this talk, I actually looked for psychology definition of what is a functional relationship between two persons or a person or everyone, and the framework. Actually, after all, it is a relationship. And actually, I find very interesting definition. A functional relationship is a relationship in which the value of one variable varies with change in the values of a second variable. Or, in other terms, a relationship is considered functional when there is respect, accountability, and resilience. A functional relationship offers an emotional, safe environment for the people involved and respects privacy of space. This is something that applies to people, but actually it also can apply to when you work with your framework. You need to trust your framework. You don't want it to be losing you. And this is what Ember is about, and about the idea that the change of variables. This is exactly what's happened in the JavaScript community. The values of the different developers, they change over time. So functional paradigms. This is something that become a hot topic in JavaScript community for the past few years. Of course, functional programming is much more older than that, but in JavaScript conferences for a few at least for this year, EmberJS conference, I was there. Almost half of the talks, in one way or another, were referencing functional programming or functional paradigms. So it's and what's interesting is that Ember actually listened to this. It saw the interest, and it evolved in order to take into the account. So at one conference, has been actually in Poland, in Lambda Days, there was Garrett Smith, who told this: if someone says to you JavaScript is a functional language, slap him in the face. So I'm against any form of violence, so I'm not going to say this. I'm actually not someone who will defend like a pure style of whatever. I just think that there are some, as I said, paradigms which are interesting and which people refer often like being inspired from functional programming. So there are data-driven architecture. We had very good idea of what's it about in Jessica talk yesterday. How they're important to explore new ideas. It's much easier than using like complex objects like ORMs or stuff like this. It's much easier to just stuff some raw data and explore what you want to build. There are immutable data. This is something that which already a few people talked yesterday, and pure functions or components, iterator, which also allowed for use of transducers, and type system. So all these things today, I'm gonna go quickly through them, can be in one way or another used in Ember. Even if they're not the core part of framework, actually framework allows us to use them pretty easily. So to begin with, immutable data structures. With simple borrow install, we can install Immutable.js, which is a library wrote by Facebook, which gives us immutable data structures, like lists, vectors, maps, etc. So all we need, actually when I begin to work on this talk, I thought that I would need much more code than this in order to make it work. But actually now with Ember 2.0, where I talked earlier about Glimmer. Glimmer is a new rendering engine which borrows ideas from React with Virtual DOM. We need to understand that Virtual DOM is just the detail of it's an implementation detail. This is why actually Ember, we're not gonna like advertise it as a core functionality. It's just we used it, so now the new rendering engine works on this, and it means that it's much easier to take advantage of immutable structures. So all we need is actually write a simple helper, which use get-in. Basically, it's replace the use of simple bindings. Actually, it disables bindings in the templates, and instead it use one-way get-in helper. It's the same template I showed you earlier, but this one uses this helper, and actually what I'm passing in is a immutable data structure instead of a regular Ember objects. Interesting part is that each helper now again with Ember 2.0 is now based on ECMAScript 6 iterators. So any object which implement iterator pattern can be used with each helper. So all this makes it much easier to use those like not regular JavaScript objects, but for example, immutable JavaScript, immutable objects. And the rendering, so these templates, for example, here I have an action, I'm going to do it in order. So in Ember, we have basically three important parts of your templating. There are components, which are very similar to React components. And then in Ember 2.0, the default one will be to disable two-way data bindings, which were one of the selling point of Ember, ironically, but we realized that it wasn't, in most cases, it wasn't such a good idea. So now they're opt-ins. And if you want to use immutable data structure, you can just disable, you have nothing to do. No more two-way data bindings. So actually the components became just in React, they can be almost pure components. Helpers in Ember were always basically pure functions. You just have something comes in, the helper is what you're seeing here. Basically, you have some parameters coming in and something's coming out. Nothing's more. And actions are very important thing. The actions in Ember 2.0, they changed also. Now they are just JavaScript closures, which means that basically you can, usually actions, you will declare them on top of your route, somewhere in your route, and then you're gonna pass them into the components if you want as much levels as you want down. And the fact that components are isolated, actions are basically the main way of sending something up. So we are in the same idea that was Flux was built on, basically data down, actions up. And so iterator, as I told you in ECMAScript 6, it allows use of transducers. I put here a definition, but it's, I think most of you have heard about transducers by now, but they will just work, since the implementation of transducers in JavaScript just use also use ECMAScript 6 iterators, so it will all just work. In the end, types. If you want to use flow types, you can probably make use of flow directly, which is the library wrote by FastBoot also to check types in JavaScript. But you have a plugin for Bubble, which is a plugin type checker, which will add some runtime checks. And this is something, again, probably you don't want to do in production, of course, but when you're running tests, you can do this, and you're going to have runtime type checks, which is pretty nice. Just very quick few words about what's coming next. So Glimmer is actually interesting. Last thing, the story of Glimmer is that it's allowed much better performance in Ember. It allowed for easier rendering, etc. But actually, it was born from the idea of FastBoot, which is the plugin for Ember, which will allow to render Ember application on the server and send HTML to the browser and then RAID rate the HTML with the application when it come in. And actually, this whole idea of RAID rotation, this is where something like the idea of virtual DOM, which basically will just apply changes to the existing DOM, and if nothing's changed, nothing will happen, is actually where Glimmer came out of. So FastBoot is going to be released not with Ember 2.0, but probably a bit later, and but it's coming. So thank you, and I'm not sure I have time for questions, but maybe one or two. Okay.
Come on, at least one question.
It's fine, I'm around, so.
So how would you decide when to use Ember versus React? Just a simple answer, because it covers.
When you want to have all the tooling. Yeah. As I said, for me, the main thing about Ember is not like, React is, again, React, it feels a lot like implementation detail. To me, what's important in a framework, React is not a framework actually, it's a library. It's a library for rendering, which is a great one. But it doesn't give you all the commodity, as I explained, like tooling, like test runners, building a facility, deployment facility, error checking, plugins infrastructure, all this. So for me, it's a matter of having battery included or not.